There is a point where cold stops behaving like cold. At 50 degrees below zero, the air turns into something solid, not as a metaphor. The vapor leaving your lungs freezes before it can scatter and falls to the ground as tiny crystals, with a sound almost too faint to catch. The Inuit have a name for that sound, the whisper of the stars. Science calls it vapor sublimation. The body calls it a warning. Exposed skin loses all feeling in under 2 minutes. Eyelids stick shut if you close them too slowly. The metal on any tool burns like an open flame if you touch it without a glove. The air enters your lungs so cold that the first breath outdoors delivers us a sting you will never forget. Welcome to Impossible Earth. If you are drawn to places that should be impossible to live in, subscribe and stay with us, because Earth keeps far more of them than anyone expects. Today we drop into the heart of an extreme Alaskan winter, the last wild frontier of North America, where nature does not negotiate, and survival is measured in hours, in decisions, in layers of clothing, and in the temperature of the fire you keep burning inside. This is not a postcard. This is one of the places Earth was never supposed to allow. But before you can understand Alaska in winter, you have to understand what kind of force you are dealing with. Alaska is not merely the biggest state in the United States. It belongs to an entirely different geographic category. Spread across more than 1.5 million square kilometers, Alaska swallows Texas twice over. Its shoreline runs longer than every other state in the country put together. 19 of the 20 highest peaks in the United States rise inside its borders. Denali, the tallest of them, climbs to 6,190 meters and manufactures weather of its own. Storms that can grind on for weeks, winds that tear past 200 kilometers an hour along the ridge. But altitude alone is not what shapes an Alaskan winter. It takes height, continental mass, and atmospheric circulation all working together. The interior of Alaska lives under an extreme continental climate. Fairbanks, the second largest city in the state, logs readings of -55 degrees Celsius on a regular basis. The all-time state record sits at -62 degrees, set in 1971 at Prospect Creek. To grasp that in physical terms, -40 is the temperature where Celsius and Fahrenheit land on the same number. It is the single point where both scales agree. It is also the point where tires flatten under parked vehicles, because rubber surrenders its flexibility. Where diesel turns solid inside a fuel tank unless something keeps it warm. Where engine oil thickens into sludge that can wreck a motor the moment it turns over. Here the cold is not a weather condition. It is a presence. It works in around window frames, through the seams of clothing, into microscopic cracks in every material. It rewrites time itself. At the solstice, a Fairbanks day offers barely 3.5 hours of sunlight. Everything else is darkness. Not the darkness of an unlit room, but the darkness of a planet turned toward open space, with no sun arriving to interrupt it. And still, inside that blackness, inside a cold that kills engines and hardens rubber, something moves. Something has worked out how to do more than endure these conditions. It owns them. The Alaskan brown bear is the animal this territory is known for, and the way it handles winter is one of the most sophisticated biological stories evolution has ever written. Come autumn, the bear slips into a state of hypothermia. For weeks, it puts away around 20,000 calories a day, building a fat layer up to 14 centimeters thick. This is not greed, it is metabolic engineering. When the cold arrives and the food disappears, the bear drops into torpor. Technically speaking, this is not deep hibernation. Its body temperature falls by only 3 to 5 degrees. Its heart beats 8 times a minute, yet a threat can bring it fully awake within minutes. A female in torpor can give birth, nurse and raise cubs without ever leaving the den. The Alaskan moose plays it differently. It does not sleep the season away, and it does not run from the cold. It meets the cold head-on, with a physiology biologists still study in amazement. Those long legs carry it through snow deep enough to stop any predator following behind. Its coat is built from hollow hairs that behave like insulating fiber, holding body heat with an efficiency that rivals the best modern synthetics. A full-grown moose can carry 800 kilograms and hold its core temperature steady at -50 degrees, simply by dialing its metabolism up or down. The Alaskan wolf works in packs that can range across more than 1,000 square kilometers of winter country. When the caribou pull south and the moose withdraw into thick forest, the wolf rewrites its strategy. It runs across wind-packed snow with a mechanical efficiency that biomechanics engineers have tried to model. Its paws act like natural snowshoes, spreading the load so it never breaks through. A pack can cover 80 kilometers in a single day with no visible sign of exhaustion. The caribou stages one of the largest migrations anywhere in the Northern Hemisphere. As many as 400,000 animals move in columns that red from the air like dark rivers running over white snow. In winter, its hooves change shape. Through summer, they stay soft and spongy, built for wet ground. In winter, they harden and sharpen into picks, made for digging under the snowpack to reach the lichen that keeps the herd alive for months. And then there is the muskox, an animal that looks lifted straight out of another geological age. A survivor of the Pleistocene and a contemporary of the mammoth, the muskox wears a double coat. An outer curtain of long hair that nearly brushes the ground, and underneath it a layer of kivute, one of the most insulating natural fibers on the planet, 8 times warmer than sheep wool. These animals do not merely survive -50 degrees, they ignore it. But if nature spent millions of years engineering these solutions, what happens when a species with no special coat, no torpor metabolism, and no hooves for digging decides to settle here and call it home? The most isolated villages of interior Alaska have no road tying them to the rest of the world. In summer, you arrive by plane, and once the rivers freeze hard enough, by vehicle straight across the ice. There are communities of barely 80 or 100 people who have to predict months in advance what fuel, what food, and what spare parts will carry them through the winter. A miscalculation here has no quick correction. The next flight can be weeks away if the weather shuts the airstrip. Modern Alaskans who choose the interior communities understand something cities make easy to forget: that infrastructure is not decoration, it is survival. Every house in the Alaskan interior keeps a backup generator. Every family stacks more firewood than the numbers say they will need. Through the coldest months, engines are never switched off because restarting one at -50 can simply be impossible. And being stranded on a road at that temperature is a genuine emergency, not an inconvenience. Heat is the axis that winter life turns on. Losing your heating at -40 is not a comfort problem. It is a countdown. With no heat, even a well-insulated house drops several degrees every hour. Without proper shelter, the human body starts losing the fight for its own core temperature within hours. But cold does not work on the body alone, it works on something deeper, something no piece of technical gear can fully protect. There is one finding that studies of life in extreme conditions keep returning to. Cold and isolation do more than wear on the body, they rebuild the way time is felt. In the interior communities of Alaska, psychologists working with long-term residents describe a phenomenon that Alaskans themselves acknowledge with dry humor: that winter keeps its own internal rhythm, one that has nothing to do with the calendar. 3 days of storm with zero visibility and -40 on the thermometer feel like a full week. A single afternoon of weak January sun gets remembered for weeks. Polar darkness is the strongest force at work. And the human brain, tuned by evolution to a cycle of light and dark that runs 24 hours, answers with hormonal shifts, disrupted sleep and, in some cases, with what doctors call seasonal affective disorder, a depression tied directly to the absence of light. Alaskans who have spent decades in the interior talk about this without drama, but with an honesty that has no equivalent in more comfortable latitudes. Winter shows you who you are, they say, when there is nothing left to distract you, when the night runs 20 hours, and the cold outside makes stepping out unprepared impossible, when the only sounds are the wind, the fire, and your own thinking. And here is the paradox. Many of them describe it as an experience they would not trade. An Alaskan winter forces a kind of presence the modern world makes hard to reach. It forces you to plan, to prepare, to place real value on warmth, on light, on company, on a hot meal. It forces you to understand that comfort is not an inherited right. It is a condition built and maintained with attention and effort. Because in the middle of that darkness, the Alaskan sky holds something millions of people cross the planet to witness just once in their lives. Nobody who has seen the Northern Lights over Alaska finds the right words straight away. The first reaction, without exception, is silence. The brain needs several seconds to process what it is looking at. A curtain of green light ripples across the entire horizon, changing shape with the fluidity of something alive, while millions of stars hold still behind it, as if they were the stage and the aurora were the actor. In some displays, the color turns. Green becomes violet, then red, then a silvered white. The physics behind the phenomenon is every bit as elegant as the spectacle itself. And yet the photographs taken in that moment show something with no ambiguity at all. People crying with joy in the cold, looking up at a light that promised to return and kept its word. But the Alaskan sky does not only hand out auroras, it hands out storms. And when Alaska decides to show what its weather can do, there is no spectacle left, only survival. Meteorologists have a name for the most extreme storms of the Arctic winter. Arctic blasts, or polar outbreaks, are events where a high-pressure mass of Arctic air slides down from the pole into the heart of the continent, carrying a speed and a temperature that can rebuild the landscape in a matter of hours. In an intense polar outbreak, the temperature can fall 20 degrees inside 6 hours. Wind turns that figure into something far more lethal. At -20 degrees, with winds of 40 kilometers an hour, exposed skin feels the equivalent of -40. At -40 with that same wind, the perceived temperature pushes past -60. Under those conditions, bare skin can freeze in under 5 minutes. Alaskan roads run by their own rules once winter sets in. The Dalton Highway, the route that reaches Prudhoe Bay on the Arctic coast, stays open all year because the Trans-Alaska Pipeline needs constant maintenance. But the drivers who run it in January know that stopping without a reason can be a final decision. Trucks supplying the northern communities carry redundant heating systems, mandatory survival kits, and strict communication protocols. Losing radio contact on the route during an active storm triggers search and rescue procedures immediately. Alaskan weather can kill. But the people who live here know something the statistics do not show easily. That knowledge is what separates the one who walks away from the one who does not. Alaskan rangers and rescue crews have a line they repeat in every survival course. Cold does not kill reckless people. It kills the ones who make a single bad decision at the wrong moment. Hypothermia is not a dramatic process, it is a silent one. It begins when the core temperature of the body slides from 37 down to 35 degrees. In that phase, the body shakes violently. Thinking slows, fingers lose their dexterity. The person knows something is wrong and can still act. But between 35 and 32 degrees, something more insidious takes over. Judgment breaks down before physical capacity does. The person starts making choices they would never make in normal conditions. Survivors of extreme situations in Alaska share one consistent trait. They are not the strongest, they are the best prepared and the calmest. Knowing how to build a fire from damp material, knowing how to raise an emergency shelter out of whatever the boreal forest offers. Knowing that movement generates heat but burns energy, and that a balance point sits somewhere between the two. Knowing that the first thought in a cold emergency has to be protecting the torso rather than the extremities, because the body will sacrifice your toes to keep the heart warm. Alaskans who live alone in remote cabins, and there are more of them than you would imagine, practice something you could call permanent existential accounting. How much firewood is left? How many days of supplies? Whether the generator has fuel? Whether the radio still works? This is not paranoia. It is an honest relationship with the surroundings. It is knowing that the planet, at these latitudes, in this season, is not waiting for you to make a mistake. It simply was never designed to forgive one. And still, year after year, new people arrive in Alaska to build exactly that life. Not because the risk escapes them, but because they understand precisely what it gives back. A clarity about what matters that no city can hand you. And that, perhaps, is the most important question Alaska puts to the rest of the planet. Not how to survive here, but what all of this means. What a place like this tells us about who we are. There is a paradox at the heart of Alaska worth naming out loud. For an unprepared human being, this is one of the most hostile places on the planet. And at the same time, it is one of the places where the people who choose to live describe the strongest sense of belonging, of purpose, and of connection with the natural world around them. Not in spite of the cold, in part because of it. Researchers studying psychological well-being in remote Alaskan communities have documented something that contradicts the assumptions of modern life. Geographic isolation does not necessarily produce psychological isolation. Small communities in the Alaskan interior show levels of social cohesion, interdependence, and mutual trust that large cities generate with far more difficulty. When winter makes every person depend on another, solidarity stops being an aspiration and becomes a practical necessity. Alaska is changing too. Arctic warming is running at a speed well above the global average. The permafrost layers, the permanently frozen ground that sits beneath much of Alaska and takes thousands of years to form, are thawing. That destabilizes building foundations, shifts local hydrology, and releases greenhouse gases that have been locked away since the age of the mammoth. The winters are still extreme, but the trend is measurable. In this sense, Alaska is more than the last wild frontier of North America. The people who settled the most inhospitable corner of the Northern Hemisphere did not do it because they had no other option, but because they built with that environment a relationship no other place produces. Living in Alaska at -50 is not about resisting the planet. It is about understanding it on its own terms. It is learning that extreme cold does not ask for surface adaptation. It asks for total attention, complete presence, honest respect for what nature is capable of doing. It is learning that the silence of an Arctic night is not emptiness. It is the planet breathing without us interrupting. And perhaps that is what we need to hear from time to time, the planet breathing. Before you leave, one question. Could you last a single winter in a place built like this? Write it in the comments. We will keep finding the places that should not be livable, and the people who live there anyway.